to my session on differentiation, the key to serving all students climbing the ladder of reading. My name is Nancy Young, and I'm presenting to you today virtually from my home on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. In the lower left, you can see that I live on the west coast of Canada, not too far north of the US border. Think of climate like Seattle, except not as much rain. Sorry, Seattle folk. And we hardly get any snow here, so it's really a lovely place to live. At the top, you can see one of my students having a lesson right by the ocean. When I teach, I love to teach outside. And at the top right, that's my bicycle. I go biking every day, and that is one spot that I usually stop at. First of all, I want to extend my thanks to the Reading League Michigan branch for inviting me to present. Thanks to all the researchers whose work grounds what I'm presenting today. And thanks to Dean Stanton. In some of my slides, you'll be seeing the art of Dean Stanton, who lives in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And last but not least, I thank all the students and parents and educators with whom I've worked over the years and whose voices and experiences are always a part of my message. Let's applaud all those people. I hope you'll clap wherever you are. Thanks to all those people. Welcome. And thanks to you for being here. And I'm going to wave at you, and I hope you'll wave wherever you are. We'll imagine we're in a great big room. Me? Oops, come back here. Okay, so me, I'm a teacher, and I worked in a variety of roles, teaching children and adults with a wide range of learning needs in 4 provinces across Canada and in New Zealand. My main focus right now is consulting, supporting schools and families. And I'm the parent of 2 children. My parent hat is always a part of my presentations, and I'm a huge advocate for including parents as integral and valued members of the team. And I'm the author of a book called Secret Code Actions, which flew up before and now can slide into my slide. This book is illustrated by Dean Stanton. I'll show it to you here. Here is the teacher edition. And of course, being an advocate for parent teamwork, I wrote a parent edition. My book is not a step-by-step program, but a resource I created to enhance any reading and spelling instruction, to bring movement into instruction and practice. It's full of other information, what I call the secrets of the code, that can be shared with students while they're moving, but the big focus is getting children moving while they're learning. And full disclosure that you'll be doing some movements from my book today, including pretending to be a monster. That's me in a classroom before COVID. I was modeling for grade 1, a code-based movement. And very important is that I am a learner. None of us know everything. We are all learning. So I welcome you no matter where you are in your learning journey. Today's webinar, the focus is differentiation. And I created this presentation because I'm a little concerned about all the whole class instruction that seems to be taking place under the science of reading umbrella, particularly focusing on certain components of instruction. So today we're going to look at my ladder of reading and think about who's climbing. I'll provide an overview of differentiation itself. I'm going to refer to the research supporting differentiation and particularly to do with teaching reading. I'll suggest a few things to consider when implementing differentiation, and I will briefly address how whole class instruction fits in. So I won't have time to cover every issue in targeting 50 minutes, but I hope you will think about your connection to differentiation as we go through the slides. If you're a teacher, how do you address the different needs of all your students? If you are an administrator, how do you support your students, your teachers, and your parents in ensuring all children have their needs met? If you are an educator at the university level, are you teaching pre-service teachers how to differentiate? If you are a program developer, how does your program provide recommendations, strategies, or supplementary material for teachers to use as they differentiate to meet the varying needs of students? Because there's no one program. I welcome you no matter what your background knowledge, and I'm sure within the group watching this presentation, we do have a wide range of knowledge. So important, I'll say it again, all of us are still learning no matter what our expertise and experience. And under the science of reading umbrella, it's important to recognize there's ongoing debate about certain instruction and certain terminology. So whether we are brand new or whether we've been doing this for years, we need to keep questioning. We need to keep shifting our thinking as needed and our practice as needed. I'm always questioning, and I expend a lot of effort on a daily basis digging into the research. There's a lot of research, but we must remember that there's still so much research that needs to be done. So everything you are hearing today is based on my best understanding of the research as of today. All right, my ladder of reading. For anyone watching who's new to learning the science of how children learn to read and why some children struggle more than others, it's so important to know there's nothing natural about learning to read. We are born for speech production. Take your hand and imagine speech coming out of your mouth. We're born for speech reception. Point to your ears. We are born to move your hands around. We are not born to read. Our brain must be rewired to master the important skill of reading. I created my ladder of reading to help educators and parents better understand the wide range of ease, the continuum when it comes to learning to read. I'm so honored that my ladder of reading is being used globally to help deliver that message, that none of us are born to read, that there's a continuum that has instructional implications. Every day I receive emails from teachers and parents and administrators and SLPs and all sorts of people living all over the world, asking for permission to use my work in their presentations and materials and so on. And of course, I'm delighted to give my permission. And if you're watching and you've connected with me, hi, I really love connecting with people all over the world. I've really been enjoying that experience. And one of the things that I've been adding for a while now to every email reply that I send when I give permission, I add in that sorry, that's my door. It's a windy day. Okay. Yes, okay. Structured literacy is not a one-size-fits-all approach. I write in my email that I am actually becoming concerned that my ladder of reading and the word advantageous at the side may be being interpreted in a way that I didn't intend. My ladder of reading makes it clear that our students vary in their instructional needs, and we need to differentiate to address those needs. And of course, I'm addressing that today. Most children here in the red require explicit, systematic, sequential instruction taught in many steps and accompanied by a great deal of practice. Children in the orange may not require as many steps and repetition, but systematic instruction addressing the structural components of language is still key. For children in the light green, instruction in some aspects of language structure may be beneficial, not only for strengthening reading skills, but to master the interconnected skills of spelling and writing. Children in the dark green are likely starting school knowing how to read. Although it may be helpful for some of these children to receive certain instruction to attain excellence in reading and spelling, in spelling and in writing, and to extend their understanding of more complex texts, such as disciplinary text, it's very important to understand that children in the dark green likely won't require the in-depth instruction of concepts and the extensive repetition needed by children in the red and maybe the orange. In the red, you see the term dyslexia, which in its most simple definition means difficulty learning to read. My ladder depicts the ease at which children rewire their brain to be able to read, not their intellectual ability. A child with dyslexia may be below average intelligence or may be above average intelligence. And some educators are not aware that a student struggling to learn to read may be very intelligent. One of my particular areas of interest, and I know I have a lot of interest, but one particular area is raising awareness of the needs of those who have dyslexia who are above average intelligence, described as twice exceptional or 2E. For these children, educator knowledge of differentiation is extremely important because they need not only the explicit instruction and repetition that the research supports for their dyslexia, but they also need the intellectual engagement that the research on giftedness has shown is necessary for our gifted children. I repeat, they need instruction and intellectual engagement. In fact, the research on 2E suggests that we should be addressing their giftedness first. But those of us in dyslexia can't let go that, part of addressing giftedness is also making sure that they can read. So I say we need to do both. Up at the top, the research indicates that children in the dark green are likely high IQ. These children need and deserve to have their needs met. It is a myth that just because a child is very smart, they'll be fine at school. Differentiation is crucial for students in the dark green. But we also have children, some of whom will be gifted, who may encounter challenges while learning to read for reasons other than, or even in addition to, dyslexia. Some environmental circumstances can make learning to read more challenging. Low SES stands for low socioeconomic status. Research suggests that children from impoverished backgrounds may be at greater risk of difficulties learning to read, but we can't assume that just because a child has a disadvantaged background, they will not soar up the ladder. In fact, they may arrive at school already reading. So that is why the arrow is pointing up and down, that gray arrow. Dialect can impact learning to read, and there's a lot of attention currently being paid to this area. ELL stands for English language learners, or students learning a language that's not their first language. Children in this group are at greater risk of difficulty because their first language is not the language of instruction. But keep in mind, they could start reading or begin school already reading in their first language. And I put school attendance here because this was an issue even before the COVID pandemic began. When students don't attend school regularly, we need to adjust for their learning when they are at school. Other exceptionalities leave children at risk for difficulties learning to read or may compound the situation. 20 to 40% of children with ADHD have dyslexia, but we need to be aware that children who have ADHD could be anywhere on the ladder of reading. And some students with ADHD will be in the dark green group. We know we need to know how to support children with ADHD wherever they are on the ladder of reading. Similarly, autism spectrum disorder, they may or may not experience challenges in learning to read. We need to support them. And developmental language disorder. Although 30 to 50% of children with language disorders will have dyslexia, developmental language disorder can certainly occur without dyslexia. Students whose individual circumstances I've noticed within this gray arrow may or may not be gifted, but the research on giftedness has shown that high intelligence is less visible when children have certain environmental and or certain co-occurring exceptionalities that are impacting their learning. And I want you to be aware that in the area of giftedness, there's a lot of research and attention being paid to ways to identify and support those who are gifted, who are in this gray arrow. So I know it's complex because there are all sorts of possible variables, but I hope that this slide illustrates the importance of differentiating instruction. I'm sure everyone would agree with this statement. All students deserve instruction that is clear, accessible, rigorous, and relevant. But the issue is, in terms of learning to read, that often people are looking for the perfect program. And the perfect program does not exist and likely will never exist because we have so many varying needs in our classroom, as I hope the last slide made clear. So we need to differentiate. In 2020, a review of the research on differentiation was published, and what a great word, boondoggle. And the review concluded that differentiated instruction in elementary school is an effective evidence-based practice. The review also made clear that differentiated instruction is not just one strategy or practice. I want to point out that this review states that differentiation is supported in elementary level, and my presentation today is focused on elementary, particularly K to 3. But please be aware there are research studies supporting differentiation in other grades. I just don't have time to delve into those today. The educator most often credited with putting the word differentiation into educational jargon, and we hope practice, is Carol Tomlinson. Her original focus was on differentiating instruction for children who were gifted because the needs of so many gifted children were not being addressed. And sadly, they are still not being addressed. My background before I knew anything about dyslexia was gifted education. And that's where I first learned about differentiation, through Carol Tomlinson's work in the middle of the 1990s. So differentiation has been integral to my approach for a long time. Tomlinson's model of differentiation starts with assessment. And when we're thinking of learning to read, assessment may be a basic screener and or maybe deeper assessment, depending on the age and the situation. The bottom line is that we're determining a child's needs based on data, and that data will range in its detail depending on the tool used. And I know different places, different government bodies, different countries, provinces, and states have different expectations with regard to how much data is produced. And we actually hardly have any data up in Canada compared to what the States has. Content. Content focuses on what is being taught. Process is how students are learning, and product, the way students demonstrate their learning. So Tomlinson has 3 components grounded in assessment. And just so you know, the product part of differentiation will likely be seen in various ways as students demonstrate their knowledge of the content, both informally and formally. So product covers a lot. And so in reading, in terms of foundational skill mastery, progress monitoring might be determining, their actual step-by-step progress of mastery of content. And then that guides progress going forward. So let's quickly look at the content aspect of Tomlinson's model from the perspective of learning to read and a structured language approach. And Dean's art may help some of you who are new to this connect and remember the concepts. So the megaphone represents the units of sound in speech called phonemes. The pencil represents the symbols by which we represent these speech sounds, the spelling patterns within words, and many of us call these graphemes. Phonics is simply the system by which we teach the connection between the individual sounds in our speech and the written symbols that represent these speech sounds. Some very bright children who've been surrounded by books since they were born and read to constantly still need explicit phonics instruction to be able to read independently. And spelling and writing are integral parts of phonics instruction. The puzzle piece on the left represents semantics, the meanings of words, morphology, the units of meanings in words, and syntax, the speech parts, and how words are used to construct sentences. Effective instruction requires that we address the needs of all of our children based on where they are in the skill development in each of these components. Some will be advanced in the content, think dark green. Some may be at the most basic foundational stages, think either the red group on my ladder of reading or perhaps somebody in the gray area at the side that I showed a few minutes ago. Let's look at process. A structured approach is based on a system, direct teaching of concepts taught in an orderly process, building skill upon skill. But this is not a one size fits all. Remember, our instruction is based on assessment. The need for, and if needed, the amount of explicit instruction and scaffolding should be based on the child's individual learning needs. For certain concepts, students in the red will likely need very explicit instruction, many steps, and many repetitions. But students in the dark green, if they need anything, may only need a very brief explanation and they'll be off to the races. I know this is a very busy slide, but I want those new to structured literacy to know this detailed overview of structured literacy is a downloadable PDF available at my website. The term structured literacy, coined by the International Dyslexia Association, is widely used to describe the content of language structure and the teaching process that should be considered when teaching the content. So here's the content, here's the what, and note that phonics is just a part of this. And here's the process. So to better understand how to differentiate for our children as they climb the ladder of reading, we need to consider both the content, what our children must know, and what those who know it may benefit from knowing more of, or the process and how will they master the content, I guess it is, and the process. So you may have noticed the words essential and advantage written on the right-hand side of my infographic. My background in dyslexia and the knowledge of the related research prompted me to write the word essential in red. My background in giftedness and my knowledge of the research on giftedness prompted me to write the word advantageous. But you heard me point out earlier that I was familiar with the need for differentiation. I'm dating myself. My instruction was rooted in a needs-based approach back then and still is now. And what I've seen is not all educators have that broad background. They don't know about differentiation. So I want to explain what I mean by advantageous in terms of the differentiation. So on the bottom, I say essential, and in this red area would be the components of structured literacy, either content or process or both, that would be essential for students with dyslexia. And at the top in the green, I'm thinking of what might be advantageous in terms of content or process or both. Note the synonyms for advantageous. If something is going to be advantageous, it needs to be beneficial, valuable, helpful, useful. Consider the dark green group. Even if they are advanced, are they still not learning to read? So what are we going to provide for them to ensure that any less developed skill areas, perhaps spelling and writing in some cases, are addressed? and that their learning continues on an upward slope in ways that are rigorous. In writing advantageous, I was also considering the enrichment opportunities that I believe the content offers advanced readers. And I've seen this in the research on giftedness now, which has really been my focus in the last couple of years, digging into that. So I've seen articles referencing, aspects of language structure, such as morphology. And even in the giftedness world, I'm constantly sharing with them the advantages of learning about historical connections to the English language and how we can actually be introducing things about history at a very early age. And our gifted children often eat this up. The research on giftedness is clear. For gifted children, the intellectual engagement is crucial, and there are facets of structured literacy that offer wonderful, intellectually engaging, enriching opportunities for advanced readers. As always, teacher knowledge of this content is needed, but teachers don't need to know it all. There's no way you can know it all. Teachers need to know how to support their advanced students enough to dive into the exploration of components of language. And this can be inquiry-based. Morphology can be a great problem-solving exercise. You have a reader, they love to solve problems, they want to be intellectually engaged. Study morphology, what fun. Word origin, I look at it as an historical adventure, and I just love sharing things with children. And what happens is other children who aren't gifted start to benefit from this sharing of information. And keep in mind that in the red group, our children who are dyslexia, we will have some who are twice exceptional. They need that intellectual engagement. So before I reach into the research on differentiation specific to reading, we need to move because we've been sitting too long, 27 minutes. So I'm going to have you get up and do a quick action. The key word is reach. The action is reach. The yellow arrow reminds us that we need to be able to go both ways. We need to go from sound to symbol and symbol to sound. And I'm going to articulate the long E sound as we do the action. And I'd like you to look at the symbol. You're looking at the symbol, the grapheme, while you are doing the action. So stand up. So anybody I can see, you have to stand up, and I'll try not to step on my 16-year-old dog who's managed to go to sleep behind me. So we're going to reach out. Okay, I'm asking you to really reach. Some of you extend your knowledge, but also maybe have to reach and shift your thinking. Good job, David. Okay, reach to one side, reach to the other side, reach up 5 times quickly and go E, 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 E. Good job. Thank you. Okay, very quick. I'm quicker because we don't have much time, but I hope you will see how quickly we can weave in a little brain break and practice a code-based skill. Your brain actually, because you've moved, you are primed to learn more now. The research on movement is amazing. I'm all about bridging the research silos. And the research in movement is incredible. So we need to get our children moving. There's an article just about every day that crosses my screen. And lest any of you are uncertain about teaching in such a fun way, well, look at this slide. From the National Reading Panel, teaching in an entertaining, vibrant, and creative manner is supported by the research done by the National Reading Panel. And remember, we're teaching children. They love to move. They love to have fun. And all the children here in this photo are practicing code-based skills. And the boy on the right, it was really funny because I was modeling in a classroom a few years ago, and this boy was standing there, and the teacher took his picture because she said he was just in amazement that this person who had come to class to to work on spelling had actually everybody down on the floor walking the wall. All right, so now National Reading Panel again, but this time to do with differentiation as we reach into the research. So I'm quoting the NRP here as we look at something that's getting a lot of attention right now. So the need to teach phonemic awareness with letters. So phonemic awareness, I'll just read it, may be most effective when children are taught to manipulate phonemes with letters and when children are taught, here it is, in small groups. From the research on dyslexia, not long ago, two well-known researchers, Sharon Vaughn and Jack Fletcher, released a wonderful summary of how to identify and teach students with significant reading problems. And in their article, Vaughn and Fletcher state that instruction for struggling readers must be customized for student need. Their article states the need for children with reading difficulties to work in small groups or perhaps one-to-one. But their article also recognizes that some children need to be working in more advanced groups. And by the way, my references aren't quite done, but if you sign up on my website for my news, I'll put that in the news that's waiting to go out. So I've just been so busy, and I normally always have my references done, but just couldn't get it done this time. Okay, oops, come back here, wait. All right, so in the area of giftedness, there is huge concern that advanced readers are experiencing negative growth due to lack of differentiation. And I'm really reaching with this slide, guys, so don't leave, stay with me. In the giftedness research and in statements made by organizations representing gifted children, I've found over and over concern about the rigidity of reading programs and the lack of attention to the needs of those who are advanced readers. So at the top of this slide is the actual title of a research paper that was published in the Journal for the Education of the Gifted in 2015. Advanced Readers in Reading First Classrooms, Who Was Really Left Behind? Considerations for the Field of Gifted Education. Wow, what a title. Brighton et al. Discovered that advanced readers in their study experienced negative growth, going from the 97th percentile rank in the spring of kindergarten to the 83rd in the spring of their second year. Their research determined that advanced readers had limited opportunities, lack of challenge, and limited rigor. They state in their research that to implement the best practices for advanced readers would have violated the key principles of the SBR program. Yes, it says SBR in this research article, and the SBR stands for scientifically based reading. According to Brighton et al., and this is really important, teachers did not know how to differentiate for the advanced readers. Not only did the teachers not have the skills needed to know how to provide opportunities for their advanced readers, but they did not feel they were allowed to try. They felt torn between the program fidelity that was expected and demanded and trying to serve the needs of advanced readers who were actually unhappy and whose parents were unhappy. And I know I hear sometimes of schools getting a program and they say, this is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to follow. There's no deviation. So I hope you'll remember this slide going forward. As we improve reading instruction, we cannot have a pendulum swing. We must address the needs of all readers. And remember, there is no perfect program. Differentiation will be essential if we're going to meet the needs of all. So when should differentiated instruction begin? Well, in preschool. And look at these findings that support the importance of differentiation based on a child's needs in preschool. In this research study, when the same code-based instruction was delivered to students of different skills, the students with more advanced skills benefited less. So you can see why some of the people in the field of giftedness, as I pointed out, are a little concerned. And this research really, the researchers said, we need to take into account the current skills of each student and differentiate instruction so that all children can be learning. I had a number of research studies on kindergarten, but I decided to put in this research because the authors are well known in the field of giftedness. And the silos represent my efforts to bridge the research silos. The research of Adelson and Carpenter showed that small groups were beneficial for all students, not just those who were identified as gifted, and that small groups in which children had similar skills enabled teachers to instruct more effectively. And we'll refer to this again in a bit. Grade 1. The first study on this slide, way back in 2000, and interesting because it's done by Connie Jewell, who's referred to often, showed that the instruction needed to be aligned to the students. So students with weaker skills progressed more when they were provided with code-based instruction, and students with the stronger reading skills made more progress when the emphasis was a literature rich and not environment, and not as much emphasis on the code. And below we see the results of another study similarly supporting the need for differentiation. Following their research on students in grade 1, Connor et al. Stated, instructional activities and patterns that are considered high quality for one child may be considered poor quality for another. How about some research in grade 3? This research was really interesting to read because it compared whole class instruction using a very well-known book and methodology around the book, and compared that to small group instruction. And the result here again was that small group instruction was generally more effective. And the conclusion again was that the skills of a child need to be considered when determining instructional activities. Perhaps some of you have noticed that some of the research cited so far is the work of the late Carol Connor and her colleagues. The contribution made by Dr. Connor and her colleagues to our understanding of effective ways to differentiate reading instruction is significant. And I encourage you to look at the numerous studies Carol Connor led in or was collaborated in with other research. I want to briefly present the different dimensions under differentiation that appear in different studies that Connor et al. Have done. So differentiation is broken up into 3 dimensions. Number 1 is the content of the literacy instruction. And for some children, this will be code-based. And for other children who have more knowledge of the code, the instruction will focus on other components, such as vocabulary or writing. Number 2 is the grouping arrangement that will be used to provide the instruction, small group or peer group or one-to-one. And number 3 focuses on the management of the grouping arrangement. The child may be assigned to work with a teacher, or maybe assigned to work with another student or in a group, or maybe assigned to work on his or her own. And all of this is based on assessing the child's skills, what the child still needs to learn, and how independently that child can work without teacher direction. So a quick look at implementation. Pretty well every article on differentiation states the importance of preparing students for the routine, teaching that routine and practicing that routine. And this includes where the stations will be. And I use the word station, some people use centers, and also what will happen at each station. Excuse me. And of course, this will vary with activity, but the general approach will be consistent. The transition process between activities needs to be clear and needs to be practiced. And I say differentiate for this. Some students will need more practice than others. A child with ADHD who has difficulty with attention regulation may not have dyslexia, but may need practice with transitions. Whereas your child with dyslexia, they'll get right away. So it just depends on the child. Not all children with dyslexia, but I'm trying to say that just because somebody has difficulty learning to read doesn't mean they can't follow directions. Have consistent signals. I always suggest to teachers that they keep their signals consistent across the grades. And I know some of you may need to give up your favorite song if you do this, but remember this: when signals change at the beginning of the year, every time we do that, the adjustment for some children is that much more difficult. And posters, I've seen some lovely posters, but I always ask, can the child who needs to follow the directions actually read the words describing the directions? So be careful with your posters. Organization. Of course, you can differentiate within your single classroom, but I encourage teachers to think about collaborating with fellow teachers to differentiate across a grade or between more than one grade. One thing about differentiation, and I referred to this in the kindergarten research, is that it can make the job of teaching reading easier and more enjoyable for teachers. And this has been my experience in consulting for schools. And sometimes it's a bit of a shift for teachers to think that they're actually going to be breaking up their class and other people will be teaching their children for some of the day. But once they start doing this, they really like it and there's no turning back. They can't imagine doing it all on their own. And what I found is when teachers collaborate with other teachers to do this and to break up the groupings, it's really fun to see which would prefer to teach which skills. And often you find one person really wants to teach foundational skills and really wants to work with children with dyslexia, and somebody else, oh, they really want to work with those advanced students. And maybe you don't have a particular preference, but I find that teachers usually gravitate to one or the other, and they're so excited about becoming an expert in that area. So the advanced readers are just going, oh yes, etymology, I wanted to learn more about that. And remember, your advanced students will be ready to eat this up, even if they're young, they're ready. And if they're gifted, remember their intellectual ability is that much more advanced. So ways of grouping. And we do group for readiness when we are teaching specific skills, but I want you to be aware that we must juggle the grouping, and we can still do this within the reading. You have to plan and you have to be creative around it, but it's so important that we vary our groupings to enable our children to be moving around, especially our children with dyslexia who are TUI and gifted. They need to be working with the advanced readers for certain things. And this is where assistive technology can help. Or it might be that the person who's the advanced reader is their best friend. They're used to working with them. So really be careful about juggling your groupings. We need to find our personal interests of our children, particularly our children who have dyslexia. It's really, really important to find their interests, what they love, what they're good at, and their personal strengths, and weave that into our grouping, not just in reading, but at other times of the day. The materials that I recommend often are the materials at the Florida Center for Reading Research. And I want you to know that in one of Connor et al.'s research studies, they specifically mention FCRR. So I was going, yay. So they talk about how those materials were in their research study, and they refer to the center station approach, and they talk about I referred before to the process, some students working in groups, some independently, some are peer groups one-to-one. So I'm not going to show any slides about the Florida Center for Reading Research, but you can go in there, and if you're teaching kindergarten and you have an advanced reader, don't hesitate to look at the materials that are for grade 3-4. My son was reading in preschool. He could have been given things easily in kindergarten that were at 3, 4, 5 age level. And it would have been so interesting for him had he been given this learning opportunity. At the same time, if you're in grade 3 and you've got somebody who needs more focus on foundational skills still, then you can go back into the earlier grades, and the materials are really, really flexible that way. They're wonderful. Whole group instruction. I told you I would mention this, and I will do so quickly. I'm not saying never have whole group. In many classes, and I do support this, we want to have the quick whole group instruction if you're teaching phonics to ensure that everybody has had the instruction on the concept. And I'll mention in a second who might not be in that whole group. But most children, and in a lot of classes, everybody will have it. So it's very intentional, very quick. And this is where I say weave in skill-based movement. You can make it so much fun when you bring in movement. And our advanced readers need to move too. So if you can go to my blog post called The Win-Win, you can see the research on movement. And also I talk about how if we would just pull these two areas of research together, it's so beneficial because our children need to move more. And while they're moving, you can be peppering information. I didn't have much time to do that. Well, we did the reach, but normally I would pepper information about word meaning. And if you're working with children in a group, you can in a classroom, in a real life classroom, you can ask them to contribute information and ask them questions. And Sharon Vaughn had an article, I think it was 2000 or 2001, on differentiation. I mean, that's how long, even people in the world of dyslexia have been encouraging differentiation. And it says, ask questions while you're doing your whole group. So you can make it quick and you can make it very interesting. I suggest pre-teaching for those who take longer to master skills, and consider pre-teaching and then having them lead. So it's so rewarding and exciting and empowering for a child with dyslexia to actually know the concept that's being taught and teach it ahead. And you could have advanced readers also be leading the class in the whole group instruction or extending it. They could actually bring something in to extend knowledge. They could do a semantic web for the concept, the keyword of whatever you are working on. So I want to just quickly show you, we're going to do another movement, but I want to show you how you might differentiate for this. So imagine you've taught spelled E-R, and the children have had a chance to learn, I won't say learn to be a monster. Children love being monsters. These children here are all pretending to be a monster in a grade 1 class in BC. So you've taught that already. And then imagine teaching ahead your child who's twice exceptional, gifted in dyslexia, matching them with an advanced student who might be their best friend, and preparing them to be able to teach what the next concept. So they're going to teach spelled U-R and I-R, and they are going to introduce this to the class. So imagine your advanced reader might be up on the board and might be writing down the grapheme, and your child with dyslexia might love acting it out, or vice versa, whatever. They can present this as a team and they can be the leaders for the class. And this is what it would look like. And I'm warning you that my experience has been in our teaching, the actions that are part of a silly story, the children just say, we want more, we want more. And so what I would say is, if you were differentiating and having those children planning on teaching just 2, and you've pre-taught ahead, and then you're going to quickly have your whole group where you teach the concept, prepare your leaders to teach the whole thing, because they might be getting that, their audience might be saying, we want the whole thing. So you want to be sure to set them up for success. So really quickly, we are going to stand up and do the actions here for this story. Oh yes, every time I stand up, I think, it's so hard to be sitting so much. So we're going to pretend to be a monster. So go, nice one, David, thank you. All right. And then you're going to murmur. You're going to go murmur, murmur. And when you teach this, you can use the action. You're murmuring, but I say, oh, imagine a teenager being asked to clean up his room. And somebody in the class, usually has a brother or sister who's a teenager, you say, they're going, you know, the parent is saying, clean up your room. They're going, they're really disgruntled. Then flap your wings like a bird. Make sure you're looking at the grapheme while you're doing this, and then stretch early. And then you're going to dig, do some work, and then pick up your suitcase and go on a journey. So let's quickly do it again. I'll read the story. The monster walked in and murmured to his friend, the bird, it's much too early to do any work. So I'm going on a journey, and pick up your suitcase. My poor dog, she's trying to figure out what I'm doing. So yes, my suitcase is gathering dust because I haven't gone anywhere since February 2020, or haven't gone any planes. All right, so quickly I'm going to, here, this chart is in my blog post. So the research supporting this is there, and there's been tons more since I wrote this blog post. I've only added one. Remember our children with ADHD? Oh, tons of research saying they need to move. When I get my references done, so sign up for my news and get that. I will have a link to Schoolwide Enrichment Model for Reading. It's a research supported way to enrich our advanced readers. This is from the Gifted research. And what I say is our twice exceptional, gifted, and dyslexia, give them assistive technology to be able to participate in this program. Consider academic acceleration. Some of you may not have heard of this. Some of you may have heard that, you know, oh no, who would do that? The research supports acceleration. It's effective and inexpensive. And what we can do is match the pace of the curriculum to the child. So I have a link here, accelerationinstitute.org. This will be on my references as well. There are lots of ways to accelerate, but one, if you have you're a kindergarten teacher and somebody is wondering about their very advanced preschooler, they may want to consider starting school early. Grade skipping. My husband skipped a grade, so I think he's okay, but I don't want to do anecdotal. Research supports acceleration, and there are many people who skipped a grade later who said, oh, if only they'd done it sooner. Moving ahead in one subject area. Remember, our child who struggles to read might be advanced in math, so we need to move them ahead when we can. And this is what I mentioned earlier in terms of when I said there may be somebody in your class who isn't in the whole group because you have compacted their curriculum. They are, and that may be the child who's off doing an independent study of something, who's going to come back and present to the class because you know that they know already what you are presenting, and you have done your assessment on that, and you're meeting their needs. And there's a lot of focus on equity these days, and please know that acceleration is really important for our children coming from backgrounds where they don't have the opportunities at home. If the school isn't going to challenge them, they might not have that opportunity anywhere else. So we need to move our children forward, and really for our children coming from impoverished situations, this is really important to be open to. I told you you were going to have to reach. Okay, time to wrap it up. And here's a quote to finish with. I'll read it. Educational equity does not mean educational sameness. Equity respects individual differences in readiness to learn and recognizes the value of each student. So thank you. Here's my email. My website is here, and information about social media. I try to get on when I can. And if you want to use any of the images in my slides, please contact me for permission. Thanks to Dean again for his art. Dean's art represents my motto, which is this can and should be fun. So I'm all about the fun and the intellectual engagement. So I will stop share. I think I came pretty close to the time. Maybe no, yes.
Oh, it's perfect, Nancy, just lovely. And I'm so glad to hear this message. We're not hearing it enough.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really important. So thank you. I'm glad. I see some names. I never look at the chat box, but I can see it now. Some names popping out from people. I know I can't look at the chat box. I can't multitask. Luckily, the research doesn't support multitasking. So, but yes, there's lots there, and you can see how bridging the silos. You know, we have reading silo. There's so much there, but I'm going, look beyond, guys. There's the giftedness, 2E, bridging those two. Then we have the silo, the research on movement. And then we have what I call the silo of parent involvement. There's so much research supporting parent involvement. We've had that research for decades, and we're still not using parents. So I'm hoping that a silver lining of COVID will be that people can see the advantages, and not just advantages, the joy. And I mean, I work in my own private practice. I only have one, I keep one student now, just so I have a student, because I really miss students otherwise. I went for a couple of years with no students, and I thought, no, I need students again. But I have one student. But in all the years in my private practice, the way I set it up was that a parent or caregiver or nanny, whoever it was, had to be at every lesson. So I had grandparents, but one parent was, it was mostly parents, but it's sometimes grandparents. But I taught for years with the parents there, and I can't imagine not. So even now with my one student, her mom, virtually, her mom was at every lesson. And that way they really know how to support their children at home. So I'm such a fan of including parents. And I guess for me as a parent, I wish that I had been included more, and I wasn't. I was preparing things and raising money, and those, like, I don't know, part of the parent group. And I would just remember baking cakes for some cakewalk. I never bake anymore. I realized how much I didn't like baking, but yes, I would have loved to have been more involved as a parent. And I understand that there are regulations, but we can still involve parents much more than we are. And look at the parent movement to get dyslexia on the map. And just so you know, there's a lot of involvement of parents in gifted ed. So yeah.
I wanted to lift something too that I just wanted to appreciate you for. I'm a consultant, so I spend a lot of time in our public school system, and there has been that here in these parts of the United States, really understanding about the movement, but it's gotten so far away from the academics, so that our kids are pulled so far out. So something like Golden Noodle, or they get like something that's very video game like, and it's just, but I appreciate that embedded academic movement. Do you know what I mean? So we're not going so far away from the lesson that we're having our students that have some regulation problems have a hard time coming back in. So that movement's embedded right in that lesson. We're not going way out of the lesson and coming back in, and way out of a lesson and coming back in this. And a brief piece of instruction with some movement embedded right in there. So yes. I do, and I've tried to really connect that, but I loved your examples.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I've used movement for years, even before I knew about dyslexia. Sure. I was using movement, and I just can't imagine not. So, and my book, it's focused really on phonics, although I have, clues and alerts for phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, orthography, trying to all the components. But in my PD with teachers, I've done sentence combining with, you know, showing them how to do sentence combining. We actually got the teachers up and moving, and I've said, oh, children love that. And there are so many things. So, and acting out, just acting out the meanings of words is so much fun. There's so much fun in all this. That's what I want to say to teachers is, me, if I'm bored, I figure they're bored. So, you know, we can make it so much fun. We just need to, you know, the journey of learning it is a journey, but hey, those of us who got on that journey, I mean, you can't stop, right? You're just constantly learning. And that's why I say nobody knows it all. Almost every lesson with my student, she's in grade 7, I go, oh, we better look that up. And you know, oh, I love it. She says, she calls my lessons very entertaining. I don't think I've shared that online yet because this will be on YouTube, but really, you know, we look up the meanings of words and then, oh, we get into history lessons, and she knows so much history now. And then we've been studying Greek patterns, and she's learning so much about science. And I'm not an expert in science, but luckily her mother is. So, you know, she is so prepared for high school. It's so exciting. Yes. Yeah.
Well, you have been fun, and we appreciate this time and your energy and what you have gifted the world of education with your ladder. And I appreciate the lift that you brought to us this evening here in the States, evening anyways, in the Eastern time zone. And for those of you that did ask, yes, it will be recorded, and within 48 hours we will have it, and it can be found at the michiganreadingleague.org, and I will send emails out when it's up to anyone that's registered. I'll send you the link right to it. Okay.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you to all the people who watched. And I know we've got a gazillion time zones, so thank you to everybody. And if you're watching the recording later, thank you.
All right. Be well.
Thank you.
Good night.